He gave the car to America. The Rouge, a plant that was itself a giant machine. And in its time, it was the greatest industrial complex on Earth.
Henry Ford in 1919 bought out all his stockholders.
It was an illustration of his arrogance.
From that point on, he was a dictator of Ford Motor Company. This is a classic case of absolute power corrupting.
He made bitter enemies.
He was a nasty individual.
His thinking was tainted by anti-Semitism.
He had the money and the conceit to put his ideas on paper and actually publish his own magazine.
Through the Dearborn Independent, Ford blamed the Jewish people for everything. October 1929, the stock market had crashed. Millions were out of work. The Depression devastated working America. Ford was forced to shut down production and send workers home. Thousands of Ford workers were laid off. Those who stayed found their wages cut.
To work at Ford's at that time, you had to give up your dignity, your manhood. You had no control. You were just at the mercy of the Ford Motor Company. You couldn't even talk to guys on the job. If you went to the bathroom, you had to get permission from your supervisor. If he was in there over 3 or 4 minutes, one of the service guys, he would come up and put his foot where you first, and he said, stand up. When you stand up, if there wasn't something in that toilet, out you go.
He was kind of a slave to that life.
Inside his plants, he saw to it that nobody shortchanged him. Ford supervisors and foremen, many of them ex-cons and boxers, ruled the plant through fear and coercion. When more production was needed, the line was simply sped up. Heaven help the man who couldn't keep pace.
My working life at Ford was like working in hell. Harassment, the threats, the working conditions continued watching over you.
It was like Big Brother was watching you. Henry was watching you. Henry Ford was behind everything. He cloaked what he was doing behind something called the service department and the goons that he employed to terrorize workers.
No matter what you were making, if you were making $1 an hour, you went down to 50 cents an hour.
Workers on the Rouge lines had never had job security. Now those lucky enough still to have jobs became increasingly powerless. Conditions became so bad at the Rouge that workers began listening to recruiters, urging them to join something most of them had never even heard of, a union.
And he says, we're going to get a union in this place. Bill gave me some literature, and he said, don't let anybody see this. Put it in your pocket and read it when you get home, And so that's how I got involved in the union.
But in a city already devastated by unemployment, union organizers found recruiting difficult. Then, early in 1932, the Rouge shut down completely, triggering an event that would change everything.
To let Ford know that he promised us $5 a day, and he closed the plant without any explanation whatsoever. He marched through Detroit. In fact, gave us police escort all the way to the Dearborn boundary. And when we got there, we were told that we could not march any farther.
On a bitterly cold day, a crowd gathered to march on the Rouge plant and confront Henry Ford with a demand for more jobs. At the Dearborn city limits, local police had massed, but the marchers ignored their orders to disperse.
Miller and Dix, the fireworks started. Hoses started to pour ice water on top of us, and there was a cordon of police right across Miller Road proper, acting as a barricade. Right in this spot in here, piles of coal. And some of the people got on top of the piles of coal, and they threw the coals back at the police and at the company people on the other side of the fence. The march went on towards Gate 3, and that's where men were shot.
Police attacked, and a full-scale riot broke out. Machine gun fire finally dispersed the crowd.
Instead of getting jobs, we got lead, we got bullets, blood.
In the aftermath of the fighting, 4 young marchers lay dead. A 5th died several days later. There were no new jobs.
The Miller Road Martyrs, as they were called, helped draw public attention to the auto workers' case. After a brief strike, the union was finally recognized by General Motors and Chrysler. Only Henry Ford held out.
Through intimidation, he had been able to hold the line against the unions. But finally, in May of '37, hostilities reached a head.
The union's tactics grew bolder.
Union organizers, led by Walter Reuther and Richard Frankenstein, they made it to the top of the overpass leading to the plant. Then they were met by members of the Ford Service Department. The fight at the gates of Ford left the union leaders battered, but no further ahead in their struggle.
It would take 3 more years before the union felt strong enough to stage a confrontation at Ford.
So I went back and made my call. I told Mike Whitman, I said, Mike, it's now or never.
On April 1st, 1941, Andy Dewar, one of the workers in the rolling mill, changed labor history at Ford.
One day, Andy just got fed up, and he and the foreman had an argument. I'm tired of taking this BS. Get away from me. Strike. I'm going to strike, Left guy look up on the line. Strike. Strike. Left guy look up on the line. Strike. Strike. The other guy would holler, and it'd just be, strike, strike. One of my first acts was to go up and push a red button to stop the line. I had a foreman named Jim Barbery. He rushed over to, what the hell do you think you're doing? Oh, strike, strike. And just went from one department to the other in the rolling mill. That's where all the finish of the steel was made. Without steel, you can't make a damn car.
The world's largest automobile plant ground to a halt.
I made history. I shut down the Ford Motor Company.
Ford was preparing for a long fight when his wife surprised him by joining the battle. Clara Ford demanded that he settle with the union, and so she threatened to leave her husband if he didn't put an end to the hostilities. Ford called his representative and told him to sign. And that was that. Ford Motor Company was a union shop.
After the strike, the union had a legal contract with the company. The Ford contract soon became a model for the rest of American industry.
On an April evening in 1947, Henry Ford laid his head on his wife's shoulder and drifted away. Some factories closed, others shut down for a moment of silence.
Today, the Ford Motor Company is still a major player in the automobile industry.